In 1754, royal geographer Robert de Valgondy published a map that would be used in universities and encyclopedias for generations. On it, stretching from the Caspian Sea to the Pacific Ocean, was a country labeled Grand Tartary, not a small region, an empire larger than the continental United States. You can find this map today in the Library of Congress, catalog number G77671754, V3. I first encountered it while researching 19th century architecture, and I assumed it was a mistranslation, a cartographic oddity. But then I found the same empire on a 1771 edition of the Encyclopaedia Britannica, then on John Cary's 1806 map, then on hundreds of others published by royal cartographers across England, France, and Germany. Here is the problem. Grand Tartary does not exist in any modern history book, no mention in school curricula, no Wikipedia page with a flag and a capital city. An empire that appeared on every major world map for over 200 years simply vanished. What I found wasn't a mistranslation. It was evidence of the most comprehensive historical erasure ever executed. And when I finally understood what happened to Tartary, I realized we're not living in the civilization we think we are. We're living in what came after. Let me show you exactly how I discovered this and why it changes everything about our accepted timeline. I was researching why so many government buildings from the 1890s look more sophisticated than modern architecture. Courthouses, train stations, world exposition halls with construction timelines that seemed impossible for their era. That's when I first saw the word Tartary in obscure academic papers describing a Tartarian style. I assumed it was just an archaic name, like calling Istanbul Constantinople, a historical relic, nothing more. But then I compared 3 editions of Encyclopaedia Britannica. In 1771, 4 pages on Tartary geography, customs, cities. In 1823, 3 pages. In 1910, 1 paragraph. By 1950, nothing. That wasn't linguistic evolution. That was deletion. I spent 4 months cross-referencing over 300 historical maps and encyclopedias from the Library of Congress and the David Rumsey collection. What I found wasn't a civilization that faded. It was a civilization that was systematically deleted from the historical record. Let me show you exactly what I mean. Because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. The evidence is in the maps themselves, and not just 1 or 2, but hundreds, from different nations, different cartographers, all showing the same thing. Let me walk you through the evidence map by map. In 1754, French royal geographer Robert de Valgondy, Louis XV's official cartographer, published a map showing Grande Tartarie as a massive, detailed empire. It covered approximately 2.5 million square miles, larger than the entire Louisiana Purchase. Valgondy included subdivisions: independent Tartary, Chinese Tartary, and Muscovite Tartary. He marked cities like Samarkand, Tobol, and Astrakhan as major population centers. Rivers, mountain ranges, trade routes all surveyed. This wasn't a blank space labeled unknown territory, it was a documented nation. Now look at 1806. John Cary, geographer to the King of England, published a new map of Tartary. Same territory, same subdivisions, but now with capital cities and precise borders separating Tartary from China, Russia, and Persia. Cary's maps were the gold standard for British education and military planning. If he showed independent Tartary as a real political entity, that means the British Empire recognized it as such. Now, 1855. Colton's Atlas, used in American schools, still shows Tartary. But something changed. The empire is beginning to fragment, some regions relabeled, borders fainter, still recognizable but fading. Every map I'm showing you has a Library of Congress or David Rumsey collection catalog number. You can verify them yourself tonight. Here is what makes this pattern undeniable. 3 nations, France, Britain, the United States across 100 years, all independent sources, all showing the same empire with the same borders and the same cities. That is not coincidence. That is recorded history. But here is where it gets impossible to explain away. These aren't just maps, they are from official government cartographers, printed in encyclopedias, taught in universities. And then, after 1870, Tartary just vanishes. So I brought this to a cartographic historian to see if there was an explanation I was missing. Cartographic historians like J.B. Harley, who served at the University of Wisconsin and published extensively on the politics of mapmaking, have documented how maps reflect political power, not just geography. A map from the 1700s wasn't a casual sketch. Royal geographers like Valgondy and Carey worked under Geographic Society protocols, using survey coordinates, verified place names, and standardized borders. When they marked Tartary, they weren't filling a blank space with myth. They were documenting a recognized political entity. Now look at the written record. The Encyclopaedia Britannica, 3rd edition, 1771, published by Colin MacFarquhar in Edinburgh, contains an entry on Tartary spanning pages 532 to 536. That is 2,847 words describing Tartary's geography, people, and governance. The entry states, a vast country in the northern parts of Asia, bounded by Siberia on the north and west, China on the south, and the Pacific Ocean on the east. It details the Tartar nations, independent princes, specific rivers, and mountain ranges. This is more detailed coverage than Britannica gave to Sweden or Poland in the same edition. The 1823 edition still dedicates 3 full pages. By 1890, the entry shrinks to half a page. By 1911, Tartary is called an outdated geographic term. By 1960, it is absent entirely. Let me be clear, this is not linguistic evolution. When Persia changed its name to Iran in 1935, every encyclopedia still described the same country with continuous history. But Tartary's disappearance is different. There is no successor state, no continuity, just silence. When official state cartographers mark territory with specific borders, cities and subdivisions, they are documenting recognized political reality, not folklore. France, Britain, America, Russia, Germany, all independent sources, all showing the same empire for 200 years. And then, between 1850 and 1920, Tartary vanishes from every major map and encyclopedia simultaneously, not gradually, not regionally. In a single 70-year window, the empire is erased. So if this was a legitimate geographic entity recognized by every major power for 200 years, who erased it? And more importantly, why? To answer that, we need to understand who the Tartarians actually were, and what they built. So who were the Tartarians? Period encyclopedias describe them as diverse peoples living across Central Asia and Siberia, not a single ethnicity but a civilization defined by architectural and technological sophistication. The buildings attributed to Tartarian influence, now labeled Beaux-Arts or World's Fair architecture, share unmistakable features: copper domes with star-patterned tops, sacred geometry carved into every facade, and limestone or marble walls cut with precision we cannot replicate today. The San Francisco City Hall dome, completed in 1915, rises 307 feet and is taller than the U.S. Capitol dome, yet official history claims it was built in 4 years during an era of horse-drawn carriages. The knowledge to construct these structures wasn't written in blueprints. It was held by master builder guilds and Masonic architectural societies, who transmitted geometric and acoustic knowledge through 7-year apprenticeships. Apprentices learned by doing, not reading. When the masters died, that embodied knowledge died with them. Between 1870 and 1915, nearly every major city worldwide built ornate civic buildings with identical domes, sacred geometry, and ornamentation. Identical. From San Francisco to St. Petersburg to Buenos Aires. Thousands of buildings across 4 continents, all within 50 years. What did these master builders understand that we lost? Resonance architecture buildings designed to amplify specific frequencies, atmospheric energy harvesting with domes and spires acting as collectors, and construction techniques that produce durability far surpassing modern buildings with rapid timelines we cannot explain. The scale of their operation is staggering. Nearly identical ornate structures appearing in every major city during the exact same decade. And then, between 1850 and 1920, the same period, Tartary disappeared from maps. These master builders vanished. Their guilds dissolved. Their techniques lost. The buildings were officially attributed to individual architects who left no working blueprints and no documented training. The timing of this disappearance is too precise to be coincidental. Let me show you exactly what was happening simultaneously. Let me lay out the timeline. Tartary disappears from maps between 1850 and 1920. Simultaneously, the mudflood phenomenon occurs from the 1850s through the 1880s. Thousands of buildings across North America, Europe, and Asia showing buried first floors, basement windows now at ground level, and consistent flood sediment layers. Photographs from the era show workers excavating around new buildings that already look half buried. Now add a third phenomenon. In 1854, 4 years before the Civil War, not after America's orphan trains begin. Between 1854 and 1929, approximately 250,000 children are transported from eastern cities to the Midwest. Similar programs appear simultaneously in Britain, Barnardo's Homes, 1866, Australia, Canada, and Russia. The official explanation is humanitarian aid, but the programs began before the war that supposedly caused the displacement. 3 massive civilization-scale events, all within the same 70-year window. The cartographic erasure of Tartary, a global mud deposit event burying cities, and the sudden appearance of hundreds of thousands of orphaned children requiring relocation. Add to this the World's Fair construction boom from 1876 to 1915, mass institutionalization of insane asylums starting in the 1850s, and the promotion of cremation in the 1870s eliminating physical evidence. The statistical probability of these phenomena coinciding by chance approaches 0. Here is the hypothesis. What if Tartary didn't gradually fade? What if a catastrophic reset event, mudflood, energy weapon, coordinated invasion destroyed the civilization, buried its cities, and required repopulation? That would explain the orphans, the buried buildings, and the erasure. And it would mean the history we were taught is not incomplete. It is manufactured. To understand how an entire civilization could be erased this thoroughly, we need to look at what was happening politically and economically during this exact window. Between 1850 and 1920, something unprecedented happened across the world, a coordinated restructuring of power, land ownership, and historical record. Now look at what happened on the ground during this exact window. On May 20, 1862, President Abraham Lincoln signed the Homestead Act, the official narrative to encourage westward expansion and give land to settlers willing to farm it. The economic reality, 270 million acres, an area larger than Germany and France, combined transferred from public domain to private ownership in less than 50 years. The assumption behind the act was that this land was empty, unoccupied, waiting for civilization. But photographic evidence from the same period shows sophisticated buildings, infrastructure, and settlements already present across the so-called frontier. This wasn't settlement, it was reoccupation. Let me give you the numbers. In 1850, official maps showed Tartary covering over 2.5 million square miles. By 1920, 0 maps showed Tartary. In the same period, 270 million acres in America alone were redistributed. Nearly identical land reform programs appeared simultaneously: Canada's Dominion Lands Act of 1872, Australia's Selection Acts in the 1860s, and Russia's Stolypin reforms in 1906, all within the same 70-year window, all on territory that had previously been labelled Tartary on maps. Who benefited? Railroad companies received 130 million acres, nearly half the homestead allocation, creating monopolies like Union Pacific, founded in 1862, Northern Pacific in 1862, and Great Northern in 1889. Banking interests financed the new construction. Industrialists like Rockefeller, Carnegie, and Vanderbilt consolidated power during this period. The documentation gaps are extensive. U.S. Census records show population anomalies, sudden jumps in settled areas without corresponding immigration records. Building permits exist for structures that appear in photographs decades earlier than official construction dates. Orphan train children have no traceable ancestry, genealogical dead ends everywhere. But the land seizure and map erasure were just the beginning. The suppression extended to knowledge itself, what people were allowed to remember, what could be taught, what could be written. And this wasn't just happening in North America. The same methods, the same timeline, appeared across the entire world. This wasn't a regional cover-up. It was global and synchronized. North America, Homestead Act, orphan trains, mudflood evidence. Europe, Haussmann's Paris renovation from 1853 to 1870, demolishing medieval structures. Berlin's urban renewal, Vienna's ring road construction burying older layers. Erasure, Russian conquest of Central Asia from the 1850s to the 1880s, systematically renaming Tartary's heartland into administrative oblasts. Australia, colonial expansion into the interior lands, officially called uninhabited, yet sharing prior stonework and infrastructure. All of this happened between 1850 and 1920, a single 70-year window when global empires were supposedly competing against each other. Yet identical legal mechanisms appear everywhere: free land distribution acts, urban renewal demolitions, education standardization based on the Prussian model exported worldwide, encyclopedia revisions, and map relabeling. To coordinate cartographic changes across Britain, France, Germany, Russia, and America rival powers would require a level of cooperation that has no documented precedent. Either there was unprecedented secret coordination between empires, or a controlling structure above national governments. Neither appears in any official history. How do you make a civilization forget? You standardize education. Between 1870 and 1900, the Prussian mandatory schooling model was adopted globally. You destroy private libraries and archives during urban renewal, multiple documented cases. Most crucially, you wait for a generation to die. Children born after 1900 never saw Tartary on a single map. They never heard the name in school. By 1920, Tartary had vanished from common knowledge. That is not natural linguistic evolution. That is engineered amnesia. So what exactly was lost when Tartary disappeared? What could they do that we can no longer replicate? To understand the true scale of what was erased, look at what they left behind: the buildings we cannot recreate, the technology we cannot explain. Consider what they built. San Francisco City Hall, completed in 1915, rises 307 feet with ornate stonework and perfect acoustics. Official construction timeline: 4 years, using horse-drawn equipment. The building has survived 4 major earthquakes, including 1906 and 1989, with minimal structural failure. Modern engineers note that constructing an identical building today would require 8 to 12 years with power tools and cost 3 to 4 times the inflation-adjusted budget. Or the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago. Official history claims 200 ornate buildings covering 690 acres, complete with working fountains, electricity, and infrastructure, all built in 2 years, then completely demolished by 1894. Compare that to the 2012 London Olympics, which required 7 years to build Olympic Park. The official timeline of the Tartarian period is impossible by modern standards. Now look at acoustics. The Capitol Dome has a whispering gallery effect. A whisper at one point is heard perfectly 100 feet away at the opposite point. Modern architects can replicate this only with computer acoustic modeling. The builders of the Capitol had no computers, yet they achieved resonance frequencies that acoustic engineers can measure but cannot intentionally design without software. The technology indicators are everywhere: copper domes with star patterns and spires at precise geometric points. This suggests atmospheric energy collection, similar to Nikola Tesla's theories from the 1890s-80s. Master Builder Guilds operated through 7-year apprenticeships, teaching sacred geometry, material resonance, and astronomical alignment. That knowledge cannot be transmitted through blueprints alone. We have some architectural drawings from the period, but they lack the embodied knowledge: how the stone was cut without computers, how the angles were calculated, how the acoustic properties were achieved. We can X-ray the stone joints, measure the frequencies, analyze the geometry, but we cannot build another. We are not advancing from Tartarian civilization. We are living in its ruins, trying to reverse engineer what they understood naturally. And if an entire civilization this advanced could be erased from history maps, encyclopedias, collective memory, what else might be disappearing right now? Which brings us to today. Because the methods used to erase Tartary aren't ancient history. They're being deployed right now. If Tartary could be erased from maps, encyclopedias, and collective memory within 70 years, what prevents it from happening again? Look at Wikipedia. The Tartary page has been deleted and recreated multiple times, currently redirecting to Tars with no mention of Grand Tartary's 200-year presence on official maps. A small group of editors controls the modern encyclopedia, just as Britannica editors control the 19th century edition. Now look at architecture. Detroit's Michigan Central Station, a Beaux-Arts masterpiece from 1913, sat abandoned for decades before Ford purchased it in 2018. Hundreds of similar Tartarian-style buildings have been demolished rather than preserved. Reserved urban renewal then. Urban renewal now. Same term, same practice. And education. The Common Core standards, adopted by 41 US states, standardize historical curriculum with no mention of alternative historical theories or cartographic anomalies. Then, Encyclopaedia Britannica removed Tartary between 1850 and 1920. Now, Wikipedia editors control historical narrative. Then, ornate buildings demolished. Now, continuing today, the pattern is identical. Control the maps, control the encyclopedias, control education, demolish physical evidence. Within one generation, memory disappears. What else is being erased right now? If you can erase a civilization once, you can do it again. The question is, are you living in the original timeline or the rewritten one? You can verify this yourself. Search antique maps at local libraries. Photograph old buildings before they are demolished. Archive Wikipedia pages before they are edited. Which brings us back to where we started. Those maps. The ones you can verify yourself. The ones showing an empire that should not exist. The ones that prove history has been rewritten. So what do we do with this information? What can we actually verify? And what questions should we be asking? I don't have all the answers. But the evidence raises urgent questions. Where did the Tartarian people go? Are there descendants among us today, unaware of their heritage? How did Britain, France, Russia, and America rival empires coordinate identical map changes during the same 70-year period? What caused the global mudflood that buried first floors of buildings worldwide? If individual architects designed all these identical buildings, why are there no surviving blueprint archives or documented correspondence between architects across continents? And why do orphan train records and Tartary's disappearance overlap so precisely? Go to your local library this week, request their antique atlas collection from 1750 to 1850. Look for Tartary, Grande Tartary, or Independent Tartary. You will find it. Then look at maps from 1920 onward. It will be gone. No explanation. No historical note. Erased. History is written by the victors. But the maps don't lie. They just get redrawn. What else don't we remember? What else have we been taught to forget?